What's up, everybody? This is your host, Jonathan Brown, and welcome to another episode of the Reality Roundtable. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk about why I decided to bring the podcast back. And one of the reasons why I decided to bring the podcast back is honestly really simple. I miss doing it, and not in a surface level way. It's not just, oh, I miss recording. It was deeper than that. When I stopped podcasting, part of me honestly went quiet. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. And you don't always notice when that happens right away. You just feel a little less connected, a little less expressive, a little less creative. And I realized I miss having a place where I could think out loud. Podcasting gave me a space to process life in real time, to ask questions, to explore ideas without needing all the answers. And when that space disappeared, I felt it. That's when I knew this wasn't just a hobby. It's honestly a part of who I am. Another reason why I decided to bring the podcast back is because I genuinely miss the process of actually creating a podcast episode. Not just recording, but everything about it. Thinking about topics, jotting down notes randomly, having moments when something clicks. I enjoy sitting with ideas before they're polished. I enjoy conversations that aren't rushed. There's something grounding about that. In a world that moves fast, this podcast forces me to slow down. And slowing down isn't about weakness, it's clarity. This process reminds me that not everything needs to be instant or optimized to matter. Some things are valuable simply because they exist. I've always loved interviewing people, not because they're famous, not because they're viral, but because they live. I love when people tell me about their life stories. I love when people have a story about how they overcame obstacles to get to where they are. I love when people tell me about the processes that they go through to create whatever they're trying to create, especially in the music world. I miss doing the research for people, especially, and this is honestly really for the musicians I've interviewed. I miss doing the research of listening to their projects, listening to the words that they put in their projects for their lyrics, and then asking them about that, asking them how they came to where they came to want to put that in their music, and then hearing those conversations and letting them go on and tell their story. That's honestly something that's very fulfilling for me in my life. And honestly, I love when people who've had to adjust their expectations. And honestly, those conversations just stick with me. Because when someone shares how they've navigated doubt, uncertainty, or setbacks, it reminds you that growth honestly isn't linear. That there are roadblocks in the path when you try to grow. Everything's not going to be smooth. Everything's not going to get strictly from point A to point B. You may have to take detours, and you may have to pivot every now and then. But honestly, that's part of life, and somebody might need to hear that we're honestly constantly showing the highlights in people's lives. Especially if you spend a good amount of time on social media. People really aren't going to post their lowlights. They're really only going to post their highlights. So when you look at people's lives, you think that everything is honestly all good. And they may be going through something that we don't know about. And we rarely see the process that people go through in life. This podcast gives space for that process. And that's something that I want to continue creating. This podcast is also good for my mental health. And I want to be clear, not because it distracts me from life, but because it helps me engage with life. Honestly, having an outlet for you to be able to express your creative ideas, that honestly matters. Everything honestly isn't about the money. Honestly, everything isn't always about the validation. Something that lets you express yourself honestly. For me, that podcast is that. It gives me structure without pressure, purpose without expectation, and expression without performance. And when there are times where I just feel like I want to get something out, this space allows me to do that. And honestly, that's a powerful thing to have in life. It reminds you that you still have agency, that you're still creating and not just reacting to something. Another reason why I decided to bring this podcast back is because when it comes to the content space, honestly, I just wanted to bring some more positive energy back into the content space. Because when I was listening to some of it, I didn't like what I was hearing, and I didn't like the direction it was going. There was too much negativity. There was too much outrage, too much tearing people down without offering anything better. And honestly, I want this podcast to be something that's honestly solution-based, especially when we do have a problem. And I want to contribute something calmer to the space, something that's more thoughtful, something that's more grounded, and also something that you can come back and listen to if you just need a little bit of inspiration, or if you're kind of feeling down and you need that extra push to either get through the week, or if you need that extra push to get through something that you're trying to accomplish. And I want to give you something that you can listen to and not feel drained afterwards. And that's important to me. I want to create something that's timeless, that when you listen to it today and you go back and listen to it maybe a year or two later, that it gives you the same positive feeling those years later that it did the first time that you listened to it. And I want this to feel like a conversation, not just noise to get a reaction out of people. An important part as to why I decided to bring this podcast back is because somebody might actually need this podcast. Somebody might need to hear that they're not alone if they're feeling uncertain. Somebody might need to hear a voice that always isn't yelling, always trying to put them down. Someone might need to hear some encouragement that doesn't feel forced. And I don't know who that person is, but I do know that they're out there in the world and that they do exist. And I hope that this podcast is able to reach them. Even if it means one time. That one time makes all of this honestly worth it. And it doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be meaningful for them. Another reason why I decided to bring this podcast back is because it gives me something to look forward to. And that matters more than we honestly talk about in life. When you have something that you care about and something that you look forward to, you move through the day a little bit differently than when you're just going through the proverbial rat race of getting up, probably going to work, and then probably coming home, doing your daily routine, going back to bed, and then doing it all over again, waiting for the weekend to come, just so that you can try to decompress and maybe have a little bit of fun just to go back to work that Monday morning. When it comes to this podcast, I'm not just going through routines. I'm actually trying to build something. Even if that means building it slowly. Because like I said in the last episode, slow motion honestly is really better than no motion. And seeing something that you build, as long as you're able to see progress, it gives you more motivation to actually want to do it and to move forward in life. And that's something that this podcast actually does bring me. And you know what? The slow progress is honestly okay with me. The podcast is actually a part of my growth. It's a part of my reflection. And it's a part of my evolution. And also the podcast gives me something that I can clearly go back and listen to what I've said in the past and see if I've been able to grow as a person in the way that I move and the way that I think. And honestly, I'm excited to see where this podcast can go. I'm excited to get people back on this podcast. I'm excited to hear what kind of stories they have to tell. And I'm excited to see what their journey entailed and how they got to the point in life of where they are. And honestly, I think that there are people out there who may want to hear those stories as well. And I'm excited to bring those stories to you guys. I'm excited to see where this podcast honestly goes. And in closing, that's why the podcast is back. Not because I have everything figured out. Not because life is perfect. Because I want to put out something in the world that actually feels real, that's positive, that's constructive, and that you would actually enjoy listening to. And if you're listening to the end of this episode, I thank you for being here. I thank you for coming back. And if you're listening for the first time, I thank you for pressing play on this podcast and giving me a chance. That means a lot to me. And this is a space for honesty. This is a space for conversation. And this is a space for growth. And I'm glad to be back behind the mic. I'm your host, Jonathan Brown. And I want to thank you for listening to this episode. I told you guys that I would be back Wednesday at 12 o'clock. And I'm glad I actually kept my promise to y'all. And until next Wednesday at 12 when a new episode drops, I'm your host. And thank you for listening.